God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
See, we did it, Doug. You don't come out, you don't buck the system. No matter what the reason is, you just can basically keep your mouth shut.
The high price one cop is paying for telling the truth.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is episode 155 of the Doug Poppa podcast for Monday, June 3rd, your source for independent investigative journalism, news, commentary, and more. Support my work at paypal.me/Doug Poppa. Contact me, ladies and gentlemen, at the Doug Poppa podcast at the following encrypted email service. Serious inquiries only. I do not respond to BS or harassment, although I think some of these things I'm getting the past couple of days because of episode 154 are actually pretty funny, even though they contain false information, probably trying to distract me. Anyway, reach the Doug Poppa podcast at dpoppa, D-P-O-P-P-A, at proton.me. The topic of today's discussion, Las Vegas Metro Police Sergeant, relieved of duty, is also a defendant in a 2020 violation of civil rights lawsuit. We'll get into this shortly. Before that, I have some other news here. This is an update, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 154 that was published on May 27, 2024, and it was titled, Vegas Cops Targeted Citizens on Strip, Violated Civil Rights, Provoked Altercations to Make Arrest. Please refer to that episode for the details, because I'm not going to rehash that entire episode. In episode 154, I mentioned Las Vegas Metro Police Convention Center Area Command Sergeant Kevin Meenan, M-E-N-O-N, the supervisor of the Flexible Deployment Team, commonly called a Flex Team, that was discussed in that episode 154. Now for some updated information. According to police sources, Sergeant Meenan was relieved of duty and walked out of the Convention Center Area Command. Sources say that Meenan is currently on administrative leave with pay, pending the outcome of the Internal Affairs Bureau investigation, by the way, which could take months, I am told. When you are placed on administrative leave, you have to relinquish all your department-issued equipment, to include your building access keys, identification card, and badge. You have no police powers while you are sitting at home on the taxpayer dime on administrative leave. Sources say that administrative leave indicates that the allegations under investigation could possibly result in termination and/or criminal charges, or both. On Wednesday, May 29th, I sent a media request to the LVMPD Public Information Office inquiring as to the current status of Sergeant Meenan, whether he's on active duty, administrative leave, modified duty, or other. I did not receive a reply as at the time of this podcast. Administrative leave, ladies and gentlemen, differs from modified duty in that an officer on modified duty reports for work and may be assigned desk duty or some other assignment other than his normal duties. You may recall that on December 11, 2022, the Doug Poppa published episode 131 and broke the story that was titled, "Exposed, Police Failed to Act as Woman Was Being Murdered." According to sources, the sergeant involved in that incident was on modified duty for almost 1 year before he was demoted back to officer. Sources say that Sergeant Meenan is a fairly new sergeant. Prior to being promoted, Meenan was a detective assigned to the Homeland Security Bureau. I was told that Meenan was sent on some type of training assignment to Dubai during that time, at some point in that time. Somebody else also described him as a protege of now retired Assistant Sheriff Sasha Larkin, who retired about a week ago, and I put that out on my Twitter, Doug Poppa 1. There's a lot of information on there that I don't talk about on podcast. Sergeant Meenan was described to me as a minority officer who speaks one of the Middle Eastern languages and is a Harvard graduate. Sources say that in addition to Meenan's entire squad being admonished during the investigation, I mentioned this in 154, Convention Center Area Command Lieutenants Bradley Walford and Travis McMurdy, MCMURTY, who is the administrative lieutenant, have also been admonished. And that means they can't discuss anything about this that's under investigation. The alleged allegations that were raised in 154, according to my police sources. Allegedly, this is not the first flexible deployment team that has come under scandal/scrutiny that was under command of Captain Steve Connell during his tenure. I'll have more of that in a future episode. As a matter of fact, as somebody pointed out to me, I discussed a rogue flex team that was operating out of the South Central Area Command a few years back. I had mentioned that in a prior episode about a year ago, and one of my people that subscribes that follow me said you mentioned something about it. Again, I have much more on this. This is going to be a separate podcast. And once again, that never hit the local media. But I did mention it in a podcast, and I have much more information on this and then other problems with other flex teams under Captain Connell's command, allegedly, because this is what sources tell me. So now let's get to the civil rights lawsuit that was filed against Kevin Meenan and others when Meenan was an officer assigned to the Las Vegas Metro Police Gang Unit in 2018. For those unfamiliar with legal definitions, Title 43 of the United States Code, Section 1983, provides an individual the right to sue state government employees and others acting under the color of state law for civil rights violations. As an example, a state, county, city, or town law enforcement officer who violates your constitutional rights while working, which means under the color of office. This lawsuit that I'm going to discuss now is separate and apart from what I discussed in episode 154. It has nothing to do with this. Happened years ago. It is a pending lawsuit. Bear with me because I'm going to read some of the excerpts on this lawsuit. This was filed on September 24th, 2020. The attorney filed it, Las Vegas attorney Margaret A. McLetchie from the McLetchie Law Firm. It's filed in United States District Court, District of Nevada, case number 2:20-CV 1773, a complaint, jury trial demanded. Let me get this on the screen here. The complaint, Martin Sunday Uwa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this gentleman's name right, but I'll say Uwa, U-W-A-H, an individual, he's the plaintiff, versus Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Joseph Lombardo, individually and in his official capacity as sheriff. Remember, Joe Lombardo was the sheriff at the time when this was filed in 20. He's now the governor of Nevada. And I have multiple podcasts I did on Lombardo, on the Doug Poppa podcast. Go back and review them. Also, Kevin Meenan, M-E-N-O-N, individually and in his capacity as a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officer. Ricardo Lopez, L-O-P-E-Z, individually and in his capacity as a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officer, and then 3 John Doe officers or Jane Doe officers individually and their capacities as Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officers. Plaintiff Martin Sunday Uwa, an individual, files this complaint for damages and declaratory relief pursuant to 42 U.S.C. 1983, civil action for deprivation of rights, and then some other federal statutes. Nature of the action. On September 24, 2018, plaintiff Martin Sunday Uwa and his wife were visitors to Las Vegas, were driving back to their hotel from dinner. Unbeknownst to Dr. Uwa, their route passed through a quote-unquote high crime area, patrolled by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Metro, in parentheses, quote-unquote, a gang unit. They mention him as Dr. Martin Uwa Sunday. I'm going to just say Uwa for time purposes here. Uwa committed no traffic offense. Metro officers executed a traffic stop on Uwa. When Uwa, an African-American man, was initially questioned the rationale for the stop and refused to exit his vehicle for his own safety, Metro officers, including defendant Kevin Meenan, demonstrated that his fears were well-founded. They violently detained Dr. Uwa, who posed no objective threat, by grabbing him, slamming him into the hood of a police vehicle, choking him, and handcuffing him. Taunting Dr. Uwa for daring to question why he had stopped and brutalized, Metro officers then subjected Dr. Uwa to painful and unjustified searches. Eventually, Dr. Uwa was arrested and transported to jail, where he was held overnight. Dr. Uwa is entitled to damages, costs, and attorney's fees, punitive damages, and other relief as a victim of the civil rights violations and tort damages. I'm not reading the whole thing. I'm going to read some of the actual allegations, and because these are allegations in a lawsuit against the department and these officers. Whether this stuff is true, that's to be determined at a trial, or whether this goes to some type of settlement. There's a bunch of numbers after each one of these things. I'm going to leave them out just for time purposes. On information and belief, Sheriff Lombardo is aware of and has either explicitly or implicitly condoned or created a policy and practice of deliberate indifference toward the constitutional rights of motorists driving in quote-unquote high crime areas. Factual allegations. Metro's history of constitutional violations. On information and belief, Metro has a history of deliberate indifference toward the rights of those in Las Vegas to be free of unreasonable searches, seizures, and false arrest performed without probable cause, to be free from the use of excessive force, to be free from retaliation for engaging in protected speech, and to be free from discriminatory application of the laws based on race. In 2011, Metro entered into cooperative agreement number 2011-CK-WX-K002, pursuant to which the United States Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services commissioned a report which suggested Metro make 80 different recommendations or reforms, many of which were related to the use of force. In 2012, a Metro officer resigned from the force after abusing his authority to pull over female motorists and coerce them into exposing their breast. In 2012, Metro settled a case for $100,000 in which a Metro officer who had previously been involved in two officer-involved shootings, beat and arrested a videographer for refusing to obey his unlawful commands to stop recording police in public. In 2016, Metro settled a case for $200,000 in which a Metro officer used excessive force in detaining an unarmed woman whom he suspected but had no probable cause to believe was engaged in prostitution. According to Metro's Office of Internal Oversight, Use of Force, Statistical Analysis, 2012 to 2016, in 2016, black subjects were overrepresented and white subjects were underrepresented in officer-involved shootings in a way that was not, quote, not consistent with the racial demographics of Clark County, Nevada. In the context of the Las Vegas Strip, Metro so routinely violated the rights of street performers by citing them without probable cause that Metro and its officers were party to several lawsuits regarding infringement constitutional rights. For example, on July 9, 2009, 2 street performers filed suit in federal court alleging constitutional violations after Metro officers cited them for storing materials and obstructing the sidewalks on the Las Vegas Strip. This matter was resolved pursuant to a settlement agreement between the parties. The unlawful stop on Dr. Ua. On or about September 24, 2018, Dr. Ua and his wife were visiting Las Vegas as tourists. After obtaining a movie from a red box in an area of unincorporated Clark County, slightly north of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas campus, Dr. Ua attempted to drive himself and his wife back to the hotel they were staying at. Upon information and belief, the area in which Dr. Ua was driving has been designated by Metro as a quote-unquote high-crime area. Upon information and belief, the majority of residents in this area are non-white. Dr. Ua is an African-American man. At or about 9 o'clock p.m., Dr. Ua turned his vehicle right from a parking lot onto the same street that was occupied by defendants Officer Meenan and Officer Lopez. Dr. Ua's phone's GPS navigation system informed him that he was heading in the wrong direction and instructed him to make a U-turn toward the hotel. Out of an abundance of caution, and having noticed the presence of defendant's police vehicle on the road, Dr. Ua decided to turn left into a parking lot instead of making a potentially illegal U-turn. Furthermore, Dr. Ua intended to park his car so that he could reread the directions to the hotel on his phone without violating the law. As Dr. Ua turned left into the parking lot, Officer Meenan turned on his vehicle's police sirens and signaled for Dr. Ua to park his car. Dr. Ua complied and parked his car in the parking lot, and Officer Meenan parked the police vehicle behind Dr. Ua's car. Dr. Ua used his turn signals properly at all points of this encounter. Subtitle: Officer Meenan demands Dr. Ua exit the vehicle. After Dr. Ua parked his car, Officer Meenan approached the car. Officer Meenan asked Dr. Ua to roll down his windows, and Dr. Ua complied. Officer Meenan then asked Dr. Ua to step out of his car. Dr. Ua asked Officer Meenan what he was being stopped for and did not exit his car. Instead of simply explaining the alleged basis for the traffic stop, Officer Meenan again demanded that Dr. Ua exit his car. Dr. Ua again did not exit his car. Officer Meenan demanded Dr. Ua keep his hands where he could see them, and then repeatedly demanded Dr. Ua exit his car. Dr. Ua kept his hands visible but did not exit the car. At or about the same time, Dr. Ua's wife asked Officer Meenan's partner, Officer Lopez, through the passenger side window what they were being pulled over for. Officer Lopez refused to answer this straightforward question, instead saying, quote, "We'll let him know when he steps out," unquote. Fearing that the officers would harm them, Dr. Uar's wife emphasized that her husband was not armed, saying, quote, "His phone is in his hands and his wallet is in his hands. I just don't want you to think it's something else," unquote. In the interim, several more police vehicles arrived on scene. Officer Meenan finally threatened to physically pull Dr. Meenan out of the car if he did not exit. In response to this threat, Dr. Uar exited his car. Subtitle: Officers use excessive force and unnecessary force on Dr. Uar. Officer Meenan demanded that Dr. Uar step up to the front of the police vehicle parked behind Dr. Uar's vehicle. As Dr. Uar, who was clearly unarmed and posed no physical threat to Officer Meenan or any of the Metro officers now on scene, attempted to comply. Officer Meenan grabbed Dr. Uar's arm, twisting it behind Dr. Uar's back, slammed Dr. Uar face first onto the hood of the police vehicle, and placed handcuffs on Dr. Uar. Officer Meenan also placed Dr. Uar in a chokehold. Dr. Uar protested that it felt like Officer Meenan was going to break his arm. In response to the aggressive and dehumanizing manner in which he was being treated, Dr. Uar asked, quote, "Do you feel tough now?" unquote. Dr. Uar repeatedly asked why he was being arrested. Instead of providing a reason, Officer Meenan demanded that Dr. Uar separate his feet. Officer Meenan demanded that Dr. Uar separate his feet to a painful degree, to the point that Dr. Uar remarked, quote, "I'm doing the splits," unquote. The John Doe officers 1 through 3 participated in the detention and search of Dr. Uar by physically restraining Dr. Uar and forcing him to spread his legs during the search. The search of Dr. Uar and Dr. Uar's car revealed no weapons or contraband. Further, Dr. Uar had no warrants. Despite being subjected to painful and humiliating detention, Dr. Uar still attempted to de-escalate the situation by referring to Officer Meenan as, quote, "my G," unquote, a Texas colloquialism that means "my guy," quote unquote. When Dr. Uar informed officer defendants that he was a physician, they reacted with visible and audible incredulity, tongue twister there, incredulity and taunting. You know what I'm saying. Tongue-tied here. Subtitle, Dr. Uar is arrested and transported to the jail. That would have been the Clark County Detention Center for you people unfamiliar with Las Vegas. Number 67, Dr. Uar was detained in a parked police vehicle while Metro officers deliberated over whether to take him to jail. While being detained, Dr. Uar engaged in a conversation with the female Metro officer who had arrived on the scene. The officer told Dr. Uar that, quote, "in Nevada, we can get you out of the car for whatever reason," unquote. The officer continued, quote, "the next thing is, you are in a super high crime area, okay? So failure to use your turn signal might sound petty, but in a gang unit, we're going to do some stuff different. You know what I'm saying? Not saying that you're part of a gang or anything like that, but we're down here for a reason," unquote. Dr. UR explained his reasonable apprehension of police to the officer. Quote, "You know how the climate is where people think they're getting killed for nothing," unquote. The officer responded, despite having earlier admitted that she was not present for the initial traffic stop, quote, "I don't. You got stopped for a probable cause crime, and you weren't complying to their request, and that's how you ended up in handcuffs, bro," unquote. Dr. UR explained that when he gets pulled over, he is, quote, "already on alert," unquote, and felt that defendant, Officer Meenan, was, quote, "trying to find a reason to get me," unquote. Dr. UR also noted that officers kept telling him to relax, but that, quote, "it's hard to be relaxed when there's 4 dudes trying to slam you on the car," unquote. Dr. UR was arrested for failure to signal. Wow. Dr. UR was arrested for failure to signal. Traffic offense. Okay. Number 76, Dr. UR was transported to Clark County Detention Center, CCDC, where he was booked into jail. Dr. UR was not informed of the charge of obstruction until after he was booked into CCDC. While in CCDC, jail employees did not allow Dr. UR to take his prescribed blood thinning medication, placing Dr. UR in reasonable fear for his physical health. While in CCDC, Dr. UR recounted the story of his arrest and detention to a CCDC employee who commented that he should sue because his arrest sounded illegal. Wow, read that one again. While in CCDC, the Clark County Detention Center, Dr. UR recounted the story of his arrest and detention to a CCDC employee, in other words, a correction officer, which are Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department employees, who commented that he should sue because his arrest sounded illegal. On or about September 25, 2018, Dr. UR was released on his own recognizance. And the last thing I'm going to read here, the rest of it gets into a bunch of legal things. It's number 81. On October 25, 2018, the district attorney denied the charges of obstruction and failure to signal against Dr. UR. Very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, those allegations raised in a lawsuit. I'm assuming there's a gang unit. I don't know whether they had body cameras back in 2018, but if they do, I'm sure all this will come out during discovery if it goes that far. Now, what's the status of this lawsuit? It's an active lawsuit. Like I said, it was filed in 2020, and there was actually, and I'll read it from here, there was a motion, it says here, court to extend the deadline to file the joint pretrial order by up to and including Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. So this is an active lawsuit pending against Sergeant Meenan, now Sergeant Meenan, then Officer Meenan, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said at the beginning, support my work if you can. Like I always say, getting documents and records and stuff like that, and gas and interviews and all this stuff costs money, and that comes out of my my own pocket. So if you can support my work, please do. PayPal.me/Doug Poppa. If you don't like me and you don't want to support my channel, that's fine. Then make a donation to St. Jude's Children's Hospital if you want. Ladies and gentlemen, I got much more on this. I got much more on the allegations I raised in 154. I got much more on rogue flex team that were under command of Captain Steve Connell at various area commands, alleged, because this is what my police sources tell me. All my information comes from police sources. And like I said, I want an official response from the Metro Public Information Office the other day when I sent him that email to see what Sergeant Meenan's status was. But my police sources confirmed he is on administrative leave with pay at home pending the results of this investigation. And I'm told that could take it would take months because everybody would have to be interviewed. And remember, in the sergeant, I believe his name was Danny Cordero, that told his officers to stand down and not enter the apartment as Paula Prado Zuniga was being stabbed at least 59 times in the apartment, and she'd end up dying. It was a year where he was on modified duty at one of the area commands doing desk duty and other stuff, according to my sources, and then he was finally demoted. So these things, they take some time. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have right now. We're 30 minutes into this. I'm concentrating a lot of these podcasts specifically on the topic that I discussed because a journalist from back east, she told me the other day, she says, I just saw your podcast like a couple of weeks ago, and she said, wow, you have so much information buried in different podcasts that when you go off topic, and I said, I know some of the podcasts are like an hour and a half long, and I talk about various things with Metro. You got to remember something, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of the stories that I broke, either for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, was writing for them, and many more on my podcast since I started in 2019 have never been followed up or reported on by the local media. And a lot of people ask me that all the time, why? And I says, well, talk to the local media. But there's something, these rogue flex teams allegedly under Captain Steve Connell's command at various area commands. I got a lot of information on that, so you will get that out in future podcasts. And I got a lot of interviews set up with different people for various things, that law enforcement and stuff that want to get on the podcast and talk. So, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate it. I think that's all I have on this one. You all have a good evening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
If I wouldn't do it all over again, I would take the badge and I would leave it on somebody's desk and get out of police work.
One man who confronted truth and consequences.